and welcome back to James that we've been in for a few days now. And out of James today, hopefully I'm going to be able to, or the passage is going to be able to give us a couple of really easy, really straightforward and simple tips to enable us to simplify our lives. So if you're interested at all in being able to simplify all of those decisions, all of those things that can really mess up our heads, the things that can take away our energy, the things that can take away our time, the things that we maybe don't want to be spending time and thought processes on. There's going to be, at the end of this, a couple of really simple tips that hopefully will help us with that. But the passage from James today is one of those you're going to have to brace yourself, because it's one of those that is absolutely jam-packed full of those really interesting Christian phrases, Christian words that we struggle with sometimes. Things like temptation, things like sin, things like evil, all of those words, and you kind of expect somebody to come marching around the corner with a sandwich board on, the end of the world is nigh and you're all going to hell and all of that stuff. So to start off with, the passage is challenging. But out of that, I think we really find out something about the heart of God, and something that we can really practically apply to our lives, which is what James is all about. And as I've said before, which is why I love it. So on with the passage, but as I say, brace yourselves. And it's from James chapter 1, and it says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created." So there's kind of two definite sides to that passage, I guess. And I think for us to understand it, the first thing that we have to do is to understand something about the heart of God towards us, and to understand what God is really like, and some of the choices, if you like, that God made. And the first thing comes right from the end of that passage, where it says that God chose to give birth to us. God chose to have us created. So, in the mind of God, it does us no harm to remember, really, there was nothing wrong in God's world before he ever had the thought to create us, to create the earth, to create the universe, the stars and everything. From before the beginning of time, as we would understand it, God was, and God was perfectly content. And yet out of this heart of love, he chose to create us. He chose to have us born as part of his family. He chose to create this amazing planet that we live on. He chose to knit everything together. He chose the plants, the animals, everything. And it was a decision that God made. He didn't have to. There was nothing wrong with the life, if you like, that he was living beforehand. But we are chosen. We have been chosen by God before the beginning of time. And that's not just the human race. That's not just some abstract idea. It's really clear. God chose to make you. God, in his infinite wonder and infinite decisions, and with all of everything in the universe at his disposal, he wanted you to be created. For some bizarre reason, he wanted me to be born in 1972 and to live the life that I've lived, and to still be here on the planet in 2021 in the middle of a pandemic. He chose me out of a heart of such extreme love. And not only did he choose us, he also, it says that he created us to be the best. So it says in the passage, as a sort of a first fruits of everything that he had created. He wanted us to be the best. We were his precious crowning jewel, if you like. The human race that he created was his precious crowning jewel. We were the best idea that God ever had. So not only were you chosen, but you were chosen to be the best that you can possibly be. And we see some of that. We see some of that because also in the passage, we kind of see some of that regardless of how we might react or we might relate to God at the moment. And even as Christians, we relate to God. We know that we relate to God differently at different times, don't we? Sometimes we're in awe of his love for us, and sometimes we're really hurt, and sometimes we're upset or frustrated or angry with God, and they're all things that are natural, normal, usual reactions. And our relationship with God does change. But one thing that doesn't change about God and his heart towards us is that passage again is really clear that every single good and perfect gift that we have ever received has come from God. And that's regardless of whether we accept that at the moment or whether we don't. So every time you've had a good day, it's a gift from God. Every time your child has done well, it's a gift from God. Every time you've had enough money to pay the mortgage at the end of the month, it's a gift from God. But there is all that stuff at the start of the passage about evil and about sin and about death and all of that, and that's a natural reaction again to the fact that there is a battle going on. And I think that you don't have to have much of an opening or much of an understanding or much of an acceptance of spiritual things at all before we have to realise that there is a battle going on. Because while every good and perfect gift does absolutely come from God, we know that we get a lot of stuff that isn't good and isn't perfect and is the opposite of that and hurts us and hurts people we love. And there is a battle going on for us. There is a battle going on for our souls, and there is a battle going on to try and take God's children away from God. And that's a reality, and that's the tension into which we're born, and the tension that we have to kind of learn to live with. The tension that we kind of have to just learn to live with while we're on this earth. So perhaps all we can do then, if we're living on this earth, perhaps all we can do is try and be the good people. Try our best to be the good people. Try our best to make as wiser choices as we can to come down on the side of good for ourselves at least, and maybe if we've got concerns, over and above that, for other people as well. Maybe that's the choice we've got to make, just to try and be as good as we possibly can. But God offers us more than that. God offers us another way. God offers us a really secure strategy. And the strategy is to be welcomed home to him. Because the passage talks a lot about temptation. And I guess temptation is wound up and bound up with the choices that we make. So we can either make choices that are going to benefit us, or we can make choices that aren't really going to be for our benefit. And the thing is about this amazing God who created us, he didn't create us and create a kind of a race of robots that don't have those choices to make. He wanted us, if we were going to be with him, he wanted us to be with him because we want to. And so we have day in, day out, all the time, all of these choices to make, and those choices will determine whether or not we get closer to God or whether we get further away from God. And the choices that we make that take us further away from God in this passage are called kind of temptations, and the temptations are not seen to be great, either for us or for our relationship with God. But God does give us this secure strategy that we can follow. Because again, the passage says that God doesn't change. He doesn't change like shifting shadows. He is solid and reliable and trustworthy. And here's a little bit of an example about how this simplification that I talked about at the start might be able to happen. So do you remember before COVID was anything, before Corona was anything other than a beer? Do you remember when, if you wanted to hug your auntie or hug your granny or hug your grandchild or whatever, you just ran over to them and gave them a cuddle? Do you remember what that felt like? Just that freedom that came from being able to run into the arms of somebody that you loved, whoever that somebody was who you loved, and know that you were in a secure and a safe place. It's a bit different now, isn't it? It's a little bit different now. We've had, over the last 12 months, loads and loads of different forms of rules and regulations. We've had times where we can't touch anybody outside of the people we live in our house with. We've had social distancing. We've had the opportunity to create bubbles, you know, maybe childcare bubbles or maybe caring bubbles. But even within them, even while we're still following the rules and within the guidelines, there is still choices to be made that we have to make, because we have to decide, okay, so if I'm caring for an elderly relative and I'm allowed to be in a caring support bubble with them, but then how close do I get to them? Because where else have I been? And if I'm allowed to see other people outside, maybe I might have picked something up and I'm going to take it back and hurt somebody else, or hurt the person that I'm caring for, or if I'm, you know, looking after grandchildren, as we are at the moment, and you know, we have some real bad vulnerabilities within our household, and yet you kind of accept that you're going to hug your grandchildren because you have to, because you're physically looking after them and schooling them. But then there's that concern at the back of your mind, and there's all of these choices, and it goes round and round. And we know, we have lived and we have experienced what it's been like over the last 12 months to have all of that constant choice making stuff going on in our heads the whole time. And we long to go back to that time where we can just run into the arms of somebody that we love and know that we are safe and that we are protected. That's the best illustration that I can come up with at the moment to the choices that God gives us in terms of resisting temptation and choosing to go his way, or making our own mind up. And if we choose to go God's way, we can just run straight into the arms of safety, and we know we're safe, and it simplifies our lives hugely, because we don't have to rely on ourselves to make the right decision over and over and over and over and over again, which is so wearing and takes up so much of our brain power and takes up so much time that we could be spending on other things if we'd just made that choice to say, I'm going to go God's way and not my own way. And then just a little bit on the end, if we've decided that we are going to go God's way, how do we practically work this out? We say, okay, God, I want to go your way. I don't want to be responsible for having to make all those thousands of choices every day, which is taking up my brain space and hurting my head and making me weary, even if I don't realise that that's what it is that's making me weary. I want to just run into your arms and be safe, Jesus, with you. Well, again, from the passage, there's a couple of things that if we keep them in the forefront of our minds, will make all of our choices so much easier. It says in the passage that God created through truth, that God is the Father of light, and that God created through the word of truth. And it's those two things that I want us to remember. And the first one is that God is the word of truth. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. I'm the way, come to me, and then I'm the truth. And if we just keep truth in our mind, every time we have to make a choice, every time we have to make a decision, just say to ourselves, is this true? Is this going to work for truth? And the opposite of truth is kind of lies, isn't it? So if it's something that I'm choosing to do, would I be worried if the whole world found out? Would I be worried if the truth came out about the choice that I'm going to make for myself, and about the choice that I'm going to make about the way that I'm going to live my life? Would I be worried if the truth came out? And that's the first really simple question to ask yourself, because if you would be worried if the truth came out about a choice that you made, then don't make it. And then it takes away all of that, thought process and everything. If you'd be worried if the truth came out, if you wouldn't want people to know about what you were doing, then don't do it. So simple. It's so simple for the choices that we make for ourselves. And then finally, this thing about God being light, the Father of light. And Jesus came to banish darkness, and Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And so again, when we're making choices or decisions, and particularly around choices and decisions that might affect other people, just think, is this what I'm planning to do? Is this going to bring light to the situation? Is this going to bring light to the person that I'm trying to help? Is this going to bring that peace and that, and everything good that flows from things being in the light, from people being brought into light places? Is what I'm going to say going to be a bringer of light, a bringer of hope, a bringer of help? And if it is, go do it. And if it's not, then maybe just step back and wonder if there's another way that you can help, or wonder if actually today I'm just in such a bad mood that maybe the best thing I can do is not say anything. And that's one for me a lot of the times. I'm always great at seeing the stuff that hasn't been done rather than the stuff that has been done. So just to make that choice, just to be thinking about that, is what I'm going to do going to bring light? And if what you're going to do, or if what you're going to think, or if the choices that you're going to make are going to be on the side of truth and light, then you can be sure that you're going to be keeping yourself away from temptation, and also helping others to get closer to that light that is Jesus. Funny how some of the passages that we would first of all sort of shy away from a little bit, because they do seem like it's this God with a big stick, up there going to smite people with a dreadful smiting. When you start looking at even them, you see the character of God, and the character of God towards us is just love and truth and light. And I pray this week that you will find that helpful in terms of simplifying your thought processes and bringing you closer to Jesus. Have a great week, and God bless.